Mental health. More or nothing. Disaster after disaster after disaster.
You don't know what's going on in people's lives, but
How you overcome that, and I'm like, oh my God, why am I doing this? This 2024, that was going to be the year, and I'm my own worst enemy.
I think that hit us both. Worst thing that's ever happened to them.
One of the nicest people, had killed themselves. And are you all right?
You could relate. Wife,
Yeah.
kids, business, staff.
Because I'm thinking too much all the time that I've got ADHD. It's undiagnosed. I am listening to anybody.
On the 1% that I can control.
It's just playing devil's advocate. Yeah?
This is John,
And this is Nick.
and this is
How it is. Mental health. Let's talk about that. Now I can tell you right now that I'm not the most stable of people. But
That'll come as a shock to everyone.
but it goes back that I'm all or nothing. So I will, people say that I've got ADHD. It's undiagnosed, but the probability is I have, and I kind of accept that. But something will play on my mind constantly, and I'm my own worst enemy by a country mile. How do I deal with that? I don't know. Probably having you as a
Muse.
muse. I was going to say confidant.
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 That's the most French I've ever heard you speak.
Thank you. Oui, thank you. Control. So, I think the beginning of this year, particularly because I was geared up for the big year, this 2024, that was going to be the year we were going to really, really make it. And it just went after disaster after disaster after disaster. And I was sitting there at some points going, why am I doing this?
I don't think it was disaster. Setbacks, let's say.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Bumps in the road.
Yeah, but what doesn't kill
They
you
feel
makes you
like
stronger.
it at the time,
Yeah,
don't they?
and I kind of, there was a couple of times I just sat there. I'm like, oh my God, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Because you work the long hours and, all the stress. And again, it's the stress of having all the staff, because it's not the staff, it's the staff's families and the knock-on effect, and you're kind of looking at everything. And
Towards the middle of the year, I had a big meltdown.
yeah,
didn't I, if
you
remember.
did. Yeah, and it's how you overcome that. And I don't know. I think you're right. They're just bumps in the road, really, when you look at it. Because now, 10 months on, maybe, I can't even remember what they were about at that time.
I can remember the one that I had a big meltdown, but
Yeah.
it's. Do you know what it is? I always say this is, and I think where people need to be more sympathetic towards people is, you don't know what's going on in people's lives, but equally, whatever is going on is the worst thing they've ever imagined. So I say, if you take a millionaire who's lost a little bit of money and they're still rich, if that's the worst thing that's ever happened to them, you can't tell them that they haven't got any problems.
Yeah.
Equally, someone who's got nothing, you might not take an impact so badly because, but it might be something else. Like it ultimately, you just have to understand that it will get better at some point, but it doesn't feel like it at the time.
About a year and a half ago, I had a phone call on a Monday morning, and to say that a good friend of ours and business associate, had killed themselves. And my God, I'm not going to mention names, but the guy was one of the nicest people I've ever met, and which is hard to say, in a kind of a industry like we are. But the guy was lovely, lovely family, lovely kids, everything, from the outside just looked perfect, for that to happen, what he was struggling with. And if there's anything good that came out of that, was that I had a couple of phone calls from people who we don't normally call each other. We've known each other for many years. We're going, are you all right? We're all cut to the same cloth. And he was one of them, and I remember it well, and his exact words, we're cut from the same cloth. We've had nothing. We've worked up to really hard with our companies. We don't know what each other's feeling, but we got to promise each other, if you're feeling down, you got to talk about it.
And I think that hit us both really hard.
Yeah.
Not because we knew the person so much, but because you can relate to it.
Absolutely.
And I think that is what hit me the hardest, was like, that person's like me, with a wife, kids, business, staff. And since then, you write about positives. I've gone out of my way to ring a couple of people who, again, don't know really well, where I can see that someone's gone quiet.
Yep.
And I'm not saying they were on the edge or anything, but I know they've appreciated the phone call. And a couple of people who have been struggling in business, I've been like, please tell me you're okay, because it haunts me to think that anyone would go through that again.
Yeah, you know, do you do any? I know that's a stupid question. I'm not even going to ask you the question. I'm going to rephrase this: as what self-development do you do? Because I know we both do a lot.
So, there's a few elements to this actually. I don't get too much time to read. I probably should find more time to read, but so I tend to listen to audiobooks instead. And what I do is I have a rotation on Audible. So I'll listen to what you would call self-development business book or something, and then I mix that in with a personal one. So I'll then listen to an autobiography in between. And the reason is, I think if I don't have that gap, I think I lose a bit of humility. And then I also can't process the next one because I haven't done the first. So I've listened to Billy Connolly, Will Smith, Eddie Hearn, a few different people between those self-development books.
See, and again, we're quite similar because I like a good biography, autobiography. I love them. I signed up to Headway. So I have these kind of summaries of.
That's because you can't actually concentrate for 8 hours of a book.
But you're absolutely right. The way I think is that, you know, I can, you know, put them on in the car and I'd be listening to autobiography, and I realise for the last half an hour I haven't listened to any of it. It's just been there because I'm thinking too much all the time.
I think those autobiographies are quite good for mental health though as well.
Yep.
So I remember, as you know, I told you I was listening to Will Smith's autobiography recently, and can you remember what you said when I said I'm listening to him?
Well, that I've gone off him massively.
Something like he's a fucking weirdo was probably what you said.
Well, I went off him after the, you know, keep your wife.
Yeah, you said that. But then listening to his autobiography and what he's been through, it doesn't justify anything anyone does, but you realise these people are human. And just because of what they've achieved or what they've got, you can see the flaws in people's characters. So when I was listening to Will Smith, you could just see that he's just a real person too, who has issues. And like, you hold these, not people on a pedestal, but you don't think they're human. And I think by almost understanding other people's problems, it makes you realise that your problems are normal and you can get through them. And just listening to business books, as important as they are, is it makes out like anything's possible. And when you fall short of that, sometimes you can beat yourself up, and you have to remember you're a human being as well.
And yeah, you know, the couple of good ones I read was Jimmy Carr's is an exceptional one. It's really good. If you've not read it, you know, go out and read it, because you know, that guy had a job in marketing for Shell, right? He was being flown all around the world and stuff like that, and he gave it up to become a comedian. At that point, he did no comedy things, none at all.
But I've seen a few people do that. So I think Mickey Flanagan was one.
Yeah.
Ricky Gervais, I don't know if he had a good job, but he didn't get into comedy until late.
Very, very late. He winged it.
Yeah.
He winged it.
Do you know what? And when we think back to starting this business, or certainly when I left the job where we knew each other, I wonder if sometimes you have to take that step of, right, I'm willing to get off that earning ladder to take more risk before you can be successful, because they've taken that step. And I do wonder whether you have to do that and be willing to almost have nothing before you can actually achieve something.
It's the risk, you know. And you used to say to me, you know, come on, let's do this company together, you know, for many years. And I wouldn't do it because of the risk, because of, like, I have a nice house, I have the wife who likes money, and, you know, she likes to spend and stuff like that, and I couldn't jeopardize that. And, you know, there are times you like, well, as we know, I went back into selling cars at the same time with the compliance guys. I used to say, because I didn't want to take money out of the compliance guys, there was no money to take out of it. That's what the reality is. But then you look at people like Richard Branson, and, you know, he's dyslexic. And another one is Tom Cruise, dyslexic,
Okay.
Cher, dyslexic, and like I'm bad at spelling. I'm not dyslexic. I'm not very good with numbers, which for a guy who's been in around finance since 2004 and used to sell cars and finance prior to that. But I kind of think with those people, is it because they've got, I don't know, I don't want to use the word disability, flaw that make them work even harder to get where they are? Richard Branson, there was a lot of risk in building Virgin. So a lot of risk. Virgin, what you see, you've got Virgin Media, you've got Virgin Airways, you've got Virgin Records and stuff. That name is just literally now just...
I think these people have to find a way.
You do find a way.
I was good at school, I was good at maths, good at English, but I wasn't ultra academic. But I think it never quite clicked for me. But then I found myself in a situation where, I dropped out of uni because it wasn't right for me. And then I think I found myself in that situation where it's like, what path am I gonna follow? And
you guess what my school report was like?
Must try harder.
No, it's not. I know.
That's what mine was.
Do you know what mine was? Mine is Jonathan is a really intelligent boy, but if something doesn't interest him, he does not want to know. And he has the ability, but doesn't want to know. And I used to get bored with it. Like, I used to be really good at drawing, right? I loved art. And then I remember there's a plant pretty much like that. And they go, right, you got to draw that plant with like 47 different shades of, grey. And I'm like, but I don't want to do, that's boring. It's... So
bringing it back to mental health, that actually really concerns me about school children at the moment and how difficult that is. Obviously, social media's got a lot to answer for, but I see, because we've both got teenagers, that everything is hung up around like school and what happens there, and I don't think it's until they leave that they realise that you can carve your own path. And I think what you've said about people not being successful at school doesn't actually matter that much. It's what comes afterwards.
I absolutely, and university. I didn't go to university. I went to tech college for resits because my mates were. I lasted, I think it was 6 weeks before I said, 12 of this. And I got a job, and I got a job selling clothes because I wasn't even, like, I was into heavy metal at the time, so I wasn't even that smartly dressed, if truth be told. But I could talk. And that's what it was. And I could find out the features and benefits, as it was then, of a certain garment. And I would talk to somebody and I would ask them, what are they after? And that was it. And I'm a gobshite. And
do you think there's a common theme since you've been in business of the times that you find mentally the hardest?
Common theme. I don't think, I don't know. It used to get me down with when you have to get rid of staff. When we first started, I was always kind of like, these are going to be people we're going to have, and they're going to be with us for life. Yeah. And that was in my mind. And it goes back to what we said earlier, is that, or on another podcast, is when we mentioned every decision you make is for the company, it's not for you. And we had to get rid of, a member of staff. And the guy was lovely. He was one of the nicest people I've ever met, ever. We looked at the figures, we looked at where we were, we looked at where what we wanted to do with the company, and he had to go. It was as simple as that. And he wasn't doing what we needed him to do. And, that was a difficult sacking.
I think the hardest thing with that one actually was that most other people who've left, we've seen that the rest of the staff, not in a grouping up way, but their work has been affected by someone, and therefore it was the right thing overall. I think that one was more performance based and everyone loved that person. So therefore that made it more difficult, whereas sometimes you're almost doing the bad news on behalf of the company more so.
Like with that one, it's a particularly mad one because you couldn't get there on time. So I had to do it alone to get it, because it was first thing in the morning. Eat the Frog, Brian Tracy, a book called Eat That Frog, which is if you're going to have the most disgusting, rancid frog. And I said, you got to eat that frog at some point by the end of the week. Otherwise, your family will die. the best thing to do is pick it up and eat it straight away.
I'm not sure Brian Tracy used that exact analogy,
But it's kind of like that, not the family dying, but it's something like that. But that's what it is. And so I get rid of them. And I remember doing it. I sat the guy down. I was like, look, we've made a strategic decision, and your figure's not cutting, and you got to go. And he was like so nice about it, which kind of makes it even harder, because I prefer him to. Which has happened to me. Somebody chucked a set of keys in my face and told me that I'd see you next Tuesday, and things like that. But he said that, and then the member of staff who was there from kind of like HR, he went, he's just bought a puppy as well. After he'd left the room, and I was like, oh, it makes me feel like, and he's got engaged. And I was like, oh my God. And he's got a flat. I'm like, oh my God. And I felt awful, really, really awful. But again, you can't let sentiment and emotion get in the way of a business
and I think
decision.
that hurts personally, but it's not because we care about our feelings while doing it. Is you realise that these are human beings.
Yeah, but it was the knock-on effect, and that does play on me, because I do take it personally then, and I'm thinking, right, well, if he's got this flat, how's he going to pay for that flat, and all these kinds of, when's he going to get his next job, and all these other bits.
I think the only saving grace really is that if you're doing it for the benefit of the company, the multiple people who are still here get the long-term benefit from difficult decisions, and that's the responsibility we take, isn't it?
And I remember that particular one then, is that I had to go into the office, which is normally kind of like, buzzing, it's got this atmosphere, and you got people like Johnny and Reese cracking jokes all the time, and I went in there and it was so somber, and I said, look, everybody, this is why it's happened, don't worry. And I think Sharon hadn't been with us very long. I think she'd been like a week. I think she was like a week, and she was like, "Oh my God, what is going on here?" Yeah. So you kind of, it goes back to another difficulty in companies, is communication. It's very, very difficult to get the communication correct, and it's something I don't think we'll ever get correct. The reason is that we've had to change. We've made decisions, business decisions, on the 11th hour. And you tell everybody about this is going to happen, and the next thing you know, it doesn't happen. Yeah. They may have told people, they may have told dealers, oh, look out for this, blah, 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 and it's never going to happen. So you've raised that expectation. But if you don't tell them enough, then, which we've had staff of, I don't know about this anymore. You need to...
And do you remember they then left, and then we did an update. No one said, why? They're like, we're not bothered. We trust you.
yeah, exactly. And it's just like, so it's getting that absolute, the what's the word? The balance correct. I don't think we're ever going to do that. What have we done mistakes and failures wise? Christ, there's been too many. I think maybe the way that we've released products in the past. But we're learning and new things. Daniel Priestley's ways of doing it with Score App and things. I look at the website. A website, it took me 4.5 years to realize that a website isn't aimed at the correct audience. Again, we're changing things like that. We've made some hires, again, down to emotion. Hands up. And you go, that wasn't right, and I should never have employed them. But again, you kind of got to leave it out.
Thinking about that, like impact side of that, do you feel like the mental state at the time of making those mistakes is wrong? And how does that change when you realise they're wrong?
Oh, God, I don't know. Probably the mental state was probably, again, if I'm letting emotion get in the way of a business decision, then my mental state is definitely wrong from a business point of view. That's the way I look at it. And maybe some people kind of think that that's kind of hard-ass attitude to take, but you have to kind of just look at everything as business.
Yeah.
Within the business.
Yeah.
So, and when did I realize? I realized quite early on, but maybe the arrogance of me is that I can fix this, I can make it work. And then it gets to a point then, and you go, no. This has got to. I've got to end this. This is over. We got to look for something new. But will I make mistakes again with probably hiring? Probably. Can we do it better? Probably. Um, it's one of them really in business, isn't it?
It goes back to just trying not to take it personally. This is a business, not us. The compliance guys isn't us.
But
It's a business, and we're just the custodians of it.
and the thing is, we're saying about emotion and personally and things like that. We're using these words. And something that I've noticed, and I read it in a book a long time ago, a self-development book, and it's like a good leader is if something's gone right, they look at the staff and they go, "You guys did that." And when something goes wrong, I look in the mirror and I go, "You've done this."
Well, my theory on everything these days, which is everything is my fault.
Yeah.
And people, when I say it in those says, "Well, what do you mean?" And it's if 99% of it was someone else's fault, then I can only control that 1%.
Yeah.
And therefore, why wouldn't I focus on the 1% that I can control? Because actually it's the 99% where people get frustrated. It's often with other people's behaviours.
I think, what was I going to say? But I was going to say, something I use quite often is and I heard it off you first, is what can I have done better?
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. And it's, everything I do now, it's how could we have done it better? If sales are not selling, what could we have done better? Well, is it because of, what is it?
Training.
It's training. It's training. We've got to do training. We've got to change it here. We've got to do it there. It's the right attitudes. It's the right this. I get the attitude you take. You can be friendly with the staff to a certain degree, but then you've kind of got to realize as well as I'm the gaffer here. You know what I mean? We're making these decisions to make this company grow. And it's about growth. That's what business is about. It's always about growth. Okay, so what have we got left? Self-reflection. Oh, there's
all the time, every day, never stops. And do you know what? That's the thing that eats me up a lot of the time is that self-reflection. It's always, have I done the right thing? Could I have done it better? What are people going to think? Not think of me, but what are people going to think of what we've done? It's hard to quantify that, but ultimately it's always that self-reflection. But maybe that's a good thing. I think if you're so narcissistic that you just think, I don't care, this is about me. I think self-reflection is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I constantly reflect over conversations, meetings we've had, certain nuggets of it. It's like we had a meeting yesterday. One of the people said about the way we did some marketing around that. And I'm like, I kind of didn't realize that at the time, and I kind of get where you're coming from. But then part of me thinks, well, I think they may have been a little bit wrong in the way that was relayed back to them, because there's always two sides to every story.
I think you still struggle a little bit with feedback of, how should I put this? Feedback of that didn't quite go well enough, because I think you still take it personally.
I may do.
But we always seek that external counsel, let's call it, not from a legal perspective, but from people we trust.
Yeah.
But it hurts still to hear sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, if you're the only person in the room or has a different opinion from all the other compliance guys, how do you overcome it? Shall I go back to the old kind of first response?
Explain,
days?
yeah.
The old first response day. I'll give you a good example of this. You'd left first response at the time. I sat there in a BDM meeting. We'd been there a couple of days, and it was over the new contracts which were going out to the motor dealers. We were all there in this big kind of circle, if you like. And to the left of me was Johnny Such, and you probably remember this. And he said, right, what we need to do is a process of everybody all these new docs are going to go out with an explanation. The IDMs, which is internal dealer managers, will speak this and explain these documents to the dealers. Then we get them all back and re-signed to the new contracts. The BDMs will go out, the business development managers will go out to the bigger accounts and sit down, and that maybe with solicitors or stuff, and explain no reasoning behind it. That will all then be uploaded, put into QA, and it'll all be banked there. Do we all agree? And they went round, and everybody was going, yeah, brilliant idea. And it came to me, and I went, I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's really, really bad, and I don't want to be offensive here, and I get where you're coming from, but, we're a systems thinking company. We're lean thinking. And I could see Johnny going red as he used to. He's like, come on then.
Because he thinks you're just being awkward at this point.
Because he thought I was being awkward. And I said, but I said, well, we've all got these on our desks here, and mobile phones. And he went, right. And I said, when you click onto Google for the first time or any of these, what do you see? And he's like, a EULA, a contract. I went, it's all you need. I tick box on it. And he went, but they don't read them. I go, so? If it's good enough for Apple, if it's good enough for Google, if it's good enough for Microsoft, why can't it be good enough for me? And literally you could hear a penny drop in that. And I don't know if that is it, but it was kind of fighting against the way other people think. Well, one thing we used to, and I think, again, something I taught you, is just playing devil's advocate, yeah?
And we both do.
Yeah, we used to say that all the time, which meant is I totally disagree with everything that you're saying, yeah, but I'm going to put it across in a nice way.
But you say that. Sometimes I play devil's advocate just to make sure everyone has considered it. So I think that's actually the answer. Is often it's about being willing to be wrong. And what you don't want to do is breed an army of people, army of yes men, as they're called, yes men, yes women, is because if you do that, you never actually get the pushback you required. And I always say with that company and the Salesforce, I think when you left and after I left is that kind of gets lost. You need people to think outside the box and push back. So yeah, you've got to be willing to be wrong, and you have to, like, one thing we do at the Compliance Guys is saying to people, we want you to tell us what is wrong, and we genuinely say to people, obviously come with a solution, but do not do something because that's what you've always done. Tell us how to improve it. I
think many times that you have said, especially, you've gone, look, I'm willing to be proved wrong here. Like, I'll change my mind. Let's do it. Let's see if it works. So I think we're quite big on pushing people, or we actually reward people for coming up with different ideas in this company.
I think we even do it with ourselves, actually.
Yeah.
So sometimes, like, you'll have an idea and be like,
that's rubbish.
And I'll be like, well, let's just do it, yeah? Or it could be hire a member of staff, and it could be doesn't work out. But that's okay, because ultimately you've got to measure what the worst case is and what the best case is. And as long as you do that, that's okay. Or I've come up with some things, I'll go, that I know you probably haven't agreed, but like let's go with it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you don't do that, you don't know if you're right either, or if you're less right than the other person. So
the only way of finding out is by trying it.
Yeah.
So I agree that. And that's a wrap for this episode of How It Is.
Don't forget to like, share, comment on the video. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I think it's generally the Compliance Guys UK. And visit our website, or you can contact us by email. Captions will be in the video.
And keep caring, not scaring.